Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to our class in lymphatic and immune system. So today we're going to learn about the lymphatic system and the immune system. By far, the hardest part of this class is going to be the immune system. Um, it's a specific portion is important for your lecture, but the lymphatic part is what you're going to learn. What you need to know here is the same thing that you need to know in your labs. So your goal is to be able to identify the main organs that belongs to the lymphatic system, the major lymphatic blood vessels, and other secondary organs like the thymus and the spleen, the appendix, and some specific groups of lymph nodes. So that part is easy. Now, the hardest part again is going to be the immune system. That's the so all the students. And I remember when I was a student, um, I really had a hard time uh, these immune cells. But I'll try to do my best to go and explain each specific cell, what specific function they have, because at the end, the main idea that you have to keep in your head is that the immune system is the system is this group of cells that are in charge, basically to protect you from pathogens, from um, microbes that cause diseases. Without your immune system, you will die from a bacterial infection or viral infection or parasite or fungus. So pretty important to know specific cells and specific functions. So we're going to start with the more basic and I would say the easy part, which is just learning about the anatomy of the lymphatic system. Okay, before we um, start the class in lymphatic system in detail, I want you to look at this that I have here for you because we can see here, this is the parts of the lymphatic system that are going to be related to fluid, which is one of the main functions of the lymphatic system. So it's important to have this in mind and what I'm going to tell you here. It shouldn't be new for you because we went through this and explained this in previous classes. The main function of the heart, once again, pump the blood to your tissues because your tissues need oxygen, nutrients, water, etc. So the heart pumps blood, oxygenated blood, to the liver, to the tissues, right? I have here the word heart, and if you pay attention, I divided the heart in left and right. And you see that also is color coded. So the left side of the heart, I have it here in red, because this is the part of the heart that pumps blood that is oxygenated blood, so high oxygen uh, or concentration of oxygen. That is the blood that needs to reach the tissues. Okay, so very important. The definition of an artery is not based on the color, right? In the models or when you see pictures of anatomy and you see a blood vessel that is red, immediately you think about an artery based on the color, and that is good and that is true for the most, for most cases. But you will learn in cardiovascular system that there are arteries that they're actually blue and their veins they're actually red. So don't fool yourself. Don't think about that way because you're gonna get confused. The definition of an artery, okay, is not based on the color, but based on the blood flow. So the definition of an artery is a blood vessel that carries blood away from the heart. So the blood flow is moving from the heart towards the tissue, so it's moving away. So the left side of the heart pumps oxygenated blood through the large size arteries. What is the biggest artery in our body? The aorta. And as you're going to see, the aorta is the largest blood vessel. Then the aorta start branching into the smallest, and then those small blood vessels become even smaller and smaller and smaller. They become smaller as they move away from the heart, and they're going to be extremely tiny when they reach the tissues, when they reach your organs. So, in a simple way, blood goes to the aorta, large side arteries. After that, the blood goes through medium-sized arteries, then the blood flows to the small size arteries until it reaches the very tiny arterioles, which is the smallest artery in the body. For this, at this point, you don't need to memorize that. You're going to learn this in detail in cardiovascular. But the point here is that then blood will reach this vascular structure called capillaries, or a capillary. Okay, that is the smallest vessel, and it's pretty important. I mean, you cannot see that with the naked eye. You need a microscope, because if you can see here, those are cells. And you know that in order for you to be able to see cells, you need a microscope. So we went from macroscopic anatomy, meaning we can see the heart, we can see the aorta, we can see blood vessels without using a microscope, to the microscopic, right, capillaries. Capillaries are important because those are the ones that deliver the nutrients into the tissues. But for the purpose of this class, the most important thing that you need to know is we're going to focus on two major things: oxygen and water. Okay, so when the blood arrives to the capillaries, oxygen gets delivered, and then the blood at this point is highly oxygenated. Once the tissues take that oxygen and then the blood keeps flowing, then at this level of the capillaries, oxygen levels will be low, right? Now the blood is deoxygenated. Now let's look at the water. So let me change the color here for water. So in the same time, your tissues, they need water in the same way how you need water. So water gets delivered into the tissues. And this is the important part. The amount of water that enters the tissue should be equal to the amount of water that leaves the tissue. What that means is that if you do not reabsorb the same amount of water that you receive, that means that your tissues are going to accumulate fluids, and that's what we call edema. So edema is the medical term that we use when you have fluid accumulation in your tissues, specifically in the interstitial space. So what is the interstitial space? Just as a quick recap. So we have three spaces. We have two major spaces. All the space inside of the cell is what we call the intracellular space. And then everything else is called extracellular, is the space that is outside of the cells. Now the extracellular space is subdivided in two types. The space that is between cells, that's what we call interstitial space, and the fluid, okay, the space that is contained in the blood vessels, that's what we call intravascular. Again, don't worry about memorizing that. That is something you need to know for the future, but it's good to have these in your head already. The point here, the important for your class, is that, and I will use basic numbers, okay? Your cardiovascular system or your tissues receive approximately, in a period of 24 hours, approximately, they will receive about 20 liters of water. Okay, and remember that cardiovascular system is a cycle, right? So this is moving and repeating and repeating. But at the point here is that the tissues receive about 20 liters of water. So I'll just put here 20. So for 20 liters. And that means that in order for the tissues to prevent fluid accumulation, right, the tissues has to reabsorb, meaning move water away from the tissues in the same way how they receive. So if you receive 20, that means that you need to move 20 back. Now here's the detail, okay? From those 20, only 17 liters move using the veins. Remember that once the capillaries pass the tissues, then the blood will flow to the small size veins. And at this point, oxygen is low, so deoxygenated blood, and also water is transported through the veins, but only 17 liters. Okay, so what that means is that we have 3 liters that we need to remove from the tissues, and that's when the lymphatic system, okay, enters and plays a role, an extremely important role in reabsorbing water or interstitial fluid. So see, using the lymphatic system, we're going to drain or reabsorb 3 liters. Using the veins, 17. Let's finish the pathway of the veins. Anyways, then the blood flows back from the small veins to medium-sized veins, and then medium-sized veins, they merge to form large-sized veins. Finally, the largest veins in the body are the superior vena cava and also the inferior vena cava, right? Those are the biggest one, and you know that. They drain blood into the right side of the heart. As you can see, arteries, you start with big arteries because we're looking at the blood flow. So we normally say arteries are big, so you start with big, and then you go from big to small, right? Medium and small. Veins, they start small, and then as they approach to the heart, they become bigger and bigger and bigger, medium size, large size, and then they dump the blood inside of the heart. And that is the definition of a vein. So it's not based on the color, it's not based on the if it's oxygenated, if it's carrying oxygenated blood or deoxygenated blood. The definition of a vein is a blood vessel that carries blood towards the heart or that dumps blood into the heart. Vein is, that's the definition of a vein. Arteries is the opposite. Anyways, so this blood gets into the right side of the heart. Remember, low oxygen. So what does the heart needs to do? Remember that we need the lungs. So from the right side of the heart, the right side of the heart is in charge to pump blood into the lungs because that's the way how we're going to get oxygenated blood. Once the gas exchange occur, the lungs are not able to pump blood anywhere, so they need to reach the left side of the heart. But now the blood is oxygenated again, and then the left side of the heart then pumps blood again to the aorta and to the arteries, and the cycle repeats. Okay, so that is the cycle of blood. Water, well, we know that at the same time 70 liters of water follow that pathway. Now what happens now with those 3 liters of fluid? And they are not called blood. Okay, so blood is what flows through veins and arteries. Now the liquid that can be found in the capillaries is called lymph. Okay, so that lymph is essentially interstitial fluid, which is essentially water. So the lymph is colorless for the most part. We're going to learn that there's a specific part in the lymphatic system in which the lymph will look white, and you will learn why uh, later. But for now, just keep in mind that these 3 liters of interstitial fluid, now called lymph, will go from very tiny microscopic capillaries. These many small capillaries will merge each other to form structures that are a little bit bigger. Those are the ones that we call lymphatic vessels. Lymphatic vessels merge each other to form structures that are a little bit bigger, called lymphatic trunks. And then the lymphatic trunks will merge to form 2 largest vessels that are called the ducts. So there are 2, right lymphatic duct and thoracic duct. That's the equivalent to the inferior and superior vena cava if you want to compare it with veins. Interesting here is that the lymphatic ducts, they will drain eventually into the medium-sized vein. So the lymph that they carry, they will be dumped into the veins. In this case, will be the subclavian veins, as we're going to learn, right and left. And then the lymph at that point mixed with the blood and then it follows the pathway from medium to large veins and then to the heart. Okay, so I hope this helped you to know exactly what happens from the microscopic. That 3 liters absorption of blood is the main function of the lymphatic system, but also we're going to learn that the lymphatic system has another function uh, related to the immunity, to the immune system, which we're going to learn uh, later. This is just a representation of what I just explained. This is from your book. You can see here tissue cells. All these yellow little things are cells that are representing tissues. All this blue here is the interstitial fluid, as I mentioned before. And I told you that these red are the capillaries. So this is a capillary is the singular, of course. So that is the way how the tissues get water and oxygen and nutrients, right? And when we say water, we use the example of 20. Then that 20 liters of fluid water needs to return in order to keep, if there's accumulation, cause edema. Anyways, so you can see here lymphatic vessels. They're connected, but they're not the same than veins. Okay, so lymphatic vessels are different than veins, and some of that fluid will be reabsorbed from the tissues and will circulate through the lymphatic system, and then the other portion, the vast majority of the water and fluid that gets reabsorbed will go through veins. Okay, so that is just for the purpose of to show you here that um, learning anatomy is not about getting comfortable with the specific pictures, with the specific colors. Is more to understanding the concept of these things. So lymphatic vessel, capillaries, tissues, interstitial fluids, all of these are very important concepts you need to have, live in your head before you move on to learn the details of those. Okay, I have here the major functions of the lymphatic system. I'm pretty sure that when you ask uh, someone who is just learning anatomy, what is the function of the lymphatic system, the vast majority of them will tell you that, oh, lymphatic system is the system that protects us against infections, right? It contains the immune system. And that is true, right? That is one of the functions. But as we just learned, the major function of the lymphatic system is actually to drain body fluids. And we mentioned that this fluid returns to the bloodstream about 3 liters per day. And when this become evident, when this become relevant, you can see what happens if your lymphatic vessels do not work properly. Well, there are situations, for example, when breast cancer is a very common cancer and dangerous cancer that occur in females. When you have breast cancer, sometimes the cancer can metastasize and invade lymph nodes close to the mammary region, right? Those lymph nodes that we have in the axillary region, those lymph nodes are called axillary lymph nodes. And sometimes, in order for for doctors to remove the cancer, they have to remove these infected uh, uh, lymph nodes infected with cancer cells. So when they remove a bunch of lymph nodes and lymphatic blood vessels, one of the major or side effects that you might see sometimes after someone have a mastectomy and removing of all of these is that the arm will swallow and you will have this terrible edema, fluid accumulation that is very hard. I mean, you cannot take it away because again, you can see that the main function of the lymphatic system is to drain fluid. So if you remove and destroy the lymphatic system, you're going to have a deficit and fluid will accumulate in your tissues, causing lymphedema. Okay, so lymphedema, again, is accumulation, remember, of fluid. In this case, related to the lymphatic capillaries. What is the other function and this is important for what we're going to cover next, is that whenever you eat in your diet uh, fats or lipids, especially lipids and fat soluble vitamins, those things are not soluble in water. So what that means is that the way how your intestine will absorb these lipids and fats is using the lymphatic system instead of using the cardiovascular system. We're going to see in just in a minute, how proteins, carbohydrates, they get absorbed through veins, while fat and lipids, they get absorbed through the lymphatic system. And I told you before that the lymph, this interstitial fluid, normally is clean, it's clear, colorless, like water, but specifically in the small intestine, which is the place of the digestive system that absorb the fats, the lymph will have a different color. We're going to see that next. Okay, we mentioned this already. Lymphatic vessels, right? Think about in the same way how the veins start small and they become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because we're following the blood flow. The lymphatic system is the same. The lymphatic system will start small with capillaries. Those capillaries become bigger and form large lymphatic vessels, which eventually become ducts, which are the biggest and largest ones, and they dump at the end into the bloodstream, as we mentioned before. Lymph, we already talked about what lymph is. So lymph essentially is interstitial fluid that circulates through the lymphatic system. We said that the vast majority of the interstitial fluid or the lymph is clear because it's water, right? But there's a specific place in the small intestine where this lymph will be white, kind of milky in appearance, milk or and even the capillaries receive a name based on that, which I'm going to mention next. But I want you also to pay attention to this illustration, right? Because this is very important. Here is showing you some of the major organs, but I want you to realize that all these green lines that you can see here, those are those lymphatic vessels, okay? Now, we don't see capillaries again because those are microscopic. So we can see here many tiny lymphatic blood vessels, and very important, these blood vessels, not blood vessels, those lymphatic vessels, they will connect to this with these nodules or nodes called lymphatic, okay, or lymph nodes. And they play a role in the immune system, as we're going to see. So the lymphatic vessels is a network of vessels that transport lymph from the tissues. All of these lymphatic vessels eventually will connect to lymph nodes, which are like a checkpoints. What does that mean? That if a bacteria or a microbe is traveling through the lymphatic system, eventually will reach one of those lymph nodes, and those are the place where you have your immune system ready to destroy those things. Also, lymphatic system is like at a highway, how some of your immune cells will go from one place to another place. Let's say you cut your finger here, right? And you have bacteria growing here, so I'll just B for bacteria. Well, some of these cells that you have in the lymph nodes, they can travel through the lymphatic system to reach that infection. So you have two ways how to reach uh, tissues that are far away from where the cells are, the immune system. One is using the lymphatic vessels, and the other is using your cardiovascular system, your arteries and veins. This was the part that I was mentioning before. In this moment, it's very high yield for you to know this, and please make sure, again, I know that sometimes I repeat myself like several times, but just I cannot stress this more. It's very important for you to know the difference between lymphatic capillaries and lacteals. Okay, what is a lacteal? Basically, it's the same thing. Our lymphatic capillaries they are specifically located in the small intestine. And because the vast majority of the lymphatic capillaries, they transport lymph that is clear like water, the lacteals receive the name lacteals because the lymph that they have has like a milky fluid appearance. And this milky fluid appearance is called chyle. What is it? It's lymph that contains a lot of fat and a lot of lipid soluble vitamins. And those lacteals are specific of the small intestine because remember, the small intestine is the part of the digestive system that is in charge to absorb these nutrients that we have in our diet. So every time we eat something that contains fat, your digestive system will break that down to the smallest component, then will get absorbed, and then this all the fats will get absorbed through using these lymphatic capillaries, which receive that name, lacteals. And now you know why lacteals. Lacteals sounds like milk, and the reason why it's called milk is because fat is white and gives this appearance to the lymph. All right, this is just to illustrate what I just explained um, um, before. So in this case, I want you to notice that I have here a small intestine tissue. Okay, so what I'm trying to illustrate you here is a small intestine. Also, notice that we have the same, the heart, right? We know that the way how your intestine receive blood is the same way how your other tissues. We know that this cell, every single cell in your body need oxygen and everything. But also, I want you to notice that whenever your intestine absorbs something from the diet, primarily we're going to focus on here, proteins that you're eating in your diet, like an egg, carbohydrates, like a piece of bread, or lipids, fat, you have to be able to break those down to the smallest components, to the building blocks. And that's why in MP1 this was a big deal. This was important for you to know this, because otherwise your intestine will not be able to absorb larger molecules. So the only way how your intestine absorb these molecules is by breaking those to the smallest. So what is the building blocks of proteins? Amino acids. The process of breaking down proteins into amino acids is what we call digestion. You're going to learn the details about that when we learn digestive system later. But for now, just know that you eat in your diet proteins, you eat in your diet carbohydrate, then you break those carbohydrates into the building blocks, which are called monosaccharides. Monosaccharides is just a fancy way to say simple sugars. Okay, so monosaccharides. And notice that I color the lipids different here because I'm trying to illustrate you here what happens, right? So the building blocks of lipids, like let's say triglycerides, is fatty acids and glycerols. Those are the ones that are very tiny and your intestine can absorb them. Also, those fat soluble vitamins and water. So the point that I want to make here with all of this, you can imagine, is that the water that you drink when you're thirsty, or the proteins you eat and the carbohydrates you eat in your diet, they get absorbed through the small intestine and they go using these capillaries that will use your cardiovascular system, but specifically your veins. And then these veins will go to, and also we have the liver somewhere here, which again at this point is probably um, too crazy, but just ignore that for now. We're gonna see why and digestive system why that is important. But the point here is that those small vessels they become medium size and then from medium to large and then they dumped into the left side of the heart as we learned before. And see when what happens when we absorb fats instead of using the veins, we use the lymphatic system. So these capillaries specifically in the small intestine, because the lymph is full of fat, the lymph will look like milk, right? White. they receive the name of lacteals. Okay, lacteals. So those are the capillaries located in the small intestine. And then lacteals connect because lacteals are the same capillaries. They merge to each other to form lymphatic vessels. These lymphatic vessels connect to lymphatic trunks, which connect to lymphatic ducts, and then lymphatic ducts to the medium size, as we learned before. But that was the point that I want to make here about capillaries and lacteals. All right. Um, we mentioned lymph nodes. So lymph nodes, those are small bean-shaped organs that are located through the lymphatic system, right? I told you before that basically the main function of the lymph nodes is that they're like checkpoints. This is how they kind of represent one of them. Notice that we have lymphatic vessels. Eventually, all your lymphatic vessels connect to lymph nodes. In lymph nodes, we have lymph nodes all over the place. The lymph node is this thing here, and they cut it in half to show you how they look from inside. Inside of the lymph nodes is where you have your lymphocytes, which very important part of your white blood cells and immune system, and also macrophages, right? So basically, those lymphocytes, these cells are over here, and if you see the lymph nodes, they have connection. So all of these that you see here are lymphatic vessels that connect to a single lymph node. And all the lymph that drains inside, basically, your immune system will make sure that there's not bacteria or stuff that can be dangerous, right? And if it does, then your immune response will take place, will start if you encounter a bacteria trying to reach or moving, through your body using the lymphatic system, it will get destroyed there. Then the lymph, once it's checked and it's clean, then the lymph can keep going and move from these lymph nodes, keep moving to uh, to to form lymphatic trunks and then to form lymphatic ducts. Very important also to notice that for your lab, you're going to know specific groups of lymph nodes, what are the names, but if you remember from AMP1, the regions of the body, you will see that the group of lymph nodes that are located in the armpit, axillary. What about the lymph nodes that are located in the groin? All the group of lymph nodes in the groin, inguinal lymph nodes. What about the neck? What is the name of the region for the neck? Cervical. So lymph nodes associated with the region cervical, lymph nodes, etc. We're going to see some of them in the chest, where we have the mediastinum, so mediastinal lymph nodes, and some in the abdomen, which you're going to learn that in detail and for your lab. But just keep that in mind, that the group of lymph regions. And something that is interesting here, at least with the lower limb, is that we don't have lymph nodes in the foot. The lymph nodes begin in the popliteal region. If you remember, popliteal region is the region behind the knee. So that means that the first lymph nodes that we have from the lower limb they are located in the popliteal region. So that means that in your ankle and your toes, you don't have lymph nodes. You have lymphatic vessels, of course, but what I'm saying is that all the lymph that is collected from your foot, ankle, and leg will reach lymph nodes for the first time when they reach the popliteal region. That is the place where lymph nodes begin, right? And then there we have all the lymph nodes in other areas. But also, if you think about the lymph nodes that you have in your hand, we have lymph nodes closer and just all over the place. This is something that also is important. You know, lymphatic vessels and veins are very similar. I cannot say the same with arteries. First, because the main difference between a vein and a lymphatic vessel is what they what is the thing that they're moving, what's the thing that is contained, right? So in the veins is blood, and the lymphatic vessels is lymph. Now, an important detail here, your arteries, the way how they move blood, or blood maintains blood, is because the heart. So when the heart pumps, and the force generated by the heart generates blood pressure, and that is how that blood pressure that the heart generates is what keep the blood flowing through arteries. But as you go to the smallest and the smallest arteries until when you reach the capillaries, then that force that move fluid through the blood vessels, because the heart now is reduced drastically. What that means is that the way how blood flows through the veins is not by the heart, by effects of the heart. Or in the same way here, the way how lymph moves through the lymphatic vessels is not by the force generated by the heart. So that's a very important thing to keep in mind. So how is the fluid then moves through lymphatic vessels and veins? Well, in both uh, veins and lymphatic vessels, inside we have what we call valves. These valves are unidirectional, so they just allow movement in one single direction, or one-way valves, right? So what that means is that whenever the fluid moves towards these valves, if you have backflow of fluid or lymph, these valves will close and will prevent backflow. Again, we're not responding yet the question, what is the force that moves this fluid towards the lymphatic vessels or to the veins? So these are these ones that we have here, and they're very important for you to remember this. So the movement of the body, but specifically, is the contraction of skeletal muscles. So keep in mind that your muscles, if I put a muscle here and then another muscle here, or muscle fibers, every time you when you walk, and when you're moving when you move your extremities, that muscle contraction, it squeezes these blood vessels, and in this case these lymphatic vessels or your veins. And of the contraction of the skeletal muscle is what squeezes this and pushes the fluid in one direction. And then because you have these valves that they just open one way, the fluid can just go only in one direction. If the fluid contained in these vessels tries to go backwards, the valves will close and will not, will prevent backflow of fluid. So that's primarily for your um, extremities. Now, breathing is important also for the vessels that are in the abdomen and the thoracic cavity. I don't want to go in detail about these, how that work, but essentially when you take a deep breath, inspiration, okay, your diaphragm increases the pressure in the abdomen, and that pressure in the abdomen is what squeezes the vena cava and squeezes some of these lymphatic vessels, and that's what pushes blood, um, through back to the heart. And then when you expire, the um, chest, the thoracic cavity pressure increases, and that's what squeezes blood towards back towards the heart. So for your exams, make sure you know that it's not the action of the heart, the one that pushes or keeps the lymph flow or the blood flow through veins, but rather the action of the skeletal muscle in breathing. And of course, the presence of valves in both is important to keep unidirectional lymph and blood flow through veins and lymphatic vessels. Right, we're almost done with this first part. I'm going to conclude this lymphatic system part, and the lymphatic system with the lymphatic ducts. So what you need to remember is that those are the largest of the lymphatic system, And you need to know that there we have two. We have a right lymphatic duct and we have a thoracic duct. So let's review the first one, which is the right lymphatic duct. This is important for your lab, so make sure you understand and know this. So if you look at this picture, it's color-based. Notice all this purple part of the body represents that all the lymph that is collected by the tissues, of course, capillaries, lymphatic vessels, and then trunks, eventually all of them will merge or will drain into a single large structure called right lymphatic duct. Okay? And the right lymphatic duct, so the lymph of the right side of your body, all your right upper, right upper extremity or limb, the right side of the chest, the back, the upper portion of the abdomen, the right side of the head and neck, all of this lymph that comes from here is collected by the right lymphatic duct, which then fuses or drain into the right subclavian vein. This is a medium-sized blood vessel, if you will. So at that point, the lymph will dump there. And it's very important to recognize that, because for your exams, if you are able to identify the subclavian vein, that if you read carefully subclavian, the word sub means underneath or below. And what do you think clavian means? Clavicle. So if you can find the clavicle, the collarbone, the subclavian vein is the vein that runs underneath that bone. So that is the place where you can find the right lymphatic duct, right subclavian vein. Pretty important. The lymphatic duct do not drain into the internal jugular vein. It is subclavian. Okay. The second duct, which is actually the one that collects most of the lymph, is called the thoracic duct. Now, why is called the thoracic duct and not the left lymphatic duct, like we just learned the right lymphatic duct? I don't know. I guess this is called thoracic duct because most of the duct is located in the thoracic region. So I guess that is why it's called thoracic duct. But look in yellow, all the lymph that goes, and very important here, from your lower extremities, so the lower limbs, legs, thighs, all digestive system, okay, very important here. The small intestine, all your digestive system primarily will drain lymph eventually into this structure called the cisterna chyli. Cisterna chyli essentially is the beginning of the thoracic duct. And how do I know that that is the beginning? Because remember, we're following the lymph, we're following the flow of the fluid. So all this fluid gets collected over there, and this is a largest structure, is what we call that cisterna chyli, which you need to know that for your lecture as well. Then the lymph, if I told you before that this part collects lymph from the small intestine, you can imagine that the lymph will look white in the cisterna chyli because the lacteals and because the lymph has fat. Now, if you collect lymph from your right arm or lymph from here, the lymph will be clear. Or if you collect lymph from the upper arm, will be clear. Or if you collect lymph from the lower limbs, will be clear. But if you collect lymph from the thoracic duct, it will look white. Okay, why? Again, because the lacteals. So anyways, then that thoracic duct goes behind the heart deep and then dumps right there in the subclavian vein, but in the left side. So pretty important. Right lymphatic duct, right subclavian vein, the thoracic duct, left subclavian vein, and make sure that you visualize and you realize that all this lymph that comes from this yellow part of the body is the one that will be collected by the thoracic duct. Before I finish this class or this first portion, part A, this is the part that challenges students. Okay, is how to identify structures that do not look the same that you learn. So again, remember, you're not learning based on colors or textures. How you can find these structures, because we just learned about lymphatic duct and thoracic duct, and you may say, where are they? They don't look like the ones that I was expecting to see, or they don't look like the picture you just showed. So, but again, we're going to do that exercise. So first we need to see what we're looking at here. So this model is a model of the lymphatic system. And basically all these yellow dots that you see there, all of them are lymph nodes. You can imagine that if this is the armpit, all this group of lymph nodes, axillary lymph nodes, the lymph nodes that we have in the neck, cervical lymph nodes, they collect lymph from all the part of, parts of the body. So in the right side, we know that we have the collarbone. The clavicle is the bone that we have, the collarbone, right? So the subclavian veins is this one that I have here in green, and this one that I have here in green. So we're looking at the subclavian vein in order for us to be able to identify the lymphatic ducts, right? The right and the thoracic. So I took this portion, and I make it bigger here so we can visualize that better. I'm going to mention some stuff here that you don't need to know for your exams right now, but you will need to know that in the future for the next chapter, which is cardiovascular. So it's worth it for me to say it. Okay, so first, let's differentiate blood vessels, because this is the part that students for some reason struggle. Okay, remember that veins and lymphatic vessels, they start small and they merge each other to form structures that are bigger, and then when they merge to another or fuse with another, they form other structures. What I'm saying is, this vein that I have here in blue is the subclavian vein. I'm just going to put here SV for subclavian vein, and this is the left subclavian vein. Now, this is the left subclavian vein. Now, this one that I have here, and I'm going up, is a different vein. This one is the, I'll put L for left internal jugular vein. So, and if you pay attention, the right lymphatic duct is this white structure that connects to the subclavian vein. Now, subclavian vein and internal jugular vein, they fuse, okay? They connect to form a single blood vessel. That blood vessel is not going to be called internal jugular vein. It's not going to be called subclavian vein. It's called the left brachiocephalic vein, which I'm not writing whole name because you don't need to know it right now, but you will in the next class. All right, let's look at the other side, the right side. And first, let's just realize that this is the chest, right? And here is where you have your heart. They remove the heart to show you this structure, which is in white. Remember, why do you think they represent this in white? Because the lymph is white. This is the thoracic duct, runs deep in your chest. Notice that they cut this part of these blood vessels to show you the pathway, right? And then it drains right there. Okay, so all this white structure that runs behind the trachea, right? That is the thoracic duct. And so thoracic duct. Here is the, I'm not just color over there. This will be the right subclavian vein, this one that goes here, and they cut it to show you that. I'm not just going to reconstruct that. That will be the right internal jugular vein, and then the right internal jugular vein and the right subclavian vein merge. They form a single blood vessel. So all this one that I have here, and I'm going to just color it like this, that is what we call the right brachiocephalic vein. So because you don't have those lines, the students struggle and they confuse the brachiocephalic vein with the subclavian vein. And all of this is because, again, you look, if you have two veins and that become one, the name of that one blood vessel is different. So anyways, the thoracic duct drain into the right subclavian vein, which then they blood. And then when these two brachiocephalic veins, the right and the left, fuse, they form a single blood vessel that I'm reconstructing here. Let me change this in blue. They will form a large single blood vessel that, if you can guess, that's going to be your superior vena cava, which then superior vena cava is the vein that will drain blood into the heart. And which specific part of the heart? The right part of the heart. Okay, so pretty important. As you see that, I'm going to clean this so you can see it now better. It's all about knowing the basic shape and location to figure out what are the parts. All these are a bunch of lymph nodes that eventually drain into the right thoracic duct, they drain into the subclavian vein, and this thoracic duct, into the left subclavian vein, while the lymphatic drains into the into the right subclavian vein. Now, to conclude the class, or this first part, I'm just going to move on with the organs of the lymphatic system. We can classify these organs in primary organs and secondary organs. The primary organs are going to be those organs that produce the immune system cells, or that they're the place where those immune system cells mature. The secondary organs are the place where those mature lymphatic immune cells is the place where they are going to work, if you will. Okay, so another, keeping the analogy, another way to see bone marrow is like the factory of your white blood cells. At the same time, the bone marrow is like the university for some of the white blood cells, specifically the B cells, as I mentioned before. B cells, they mature, or if you will, they train in the bone marrow, which is the same place where they're produced. That's why they're called B cells or B lymphocytes. The T cells, they have to go, after they're produced in the bone marrow, they have to travel to the thymus, which is this organ again that is in the chest. In that place is where the T cells will mature. And then when they mature, basically they're graduates. The workplace, the place where they go to fight bacteria, is not the bone marrow, is not the thymus, is the secondary organs. So some of these B cells and T cells, they're going to go to the spleen, they're going to go to the lymph nodes, they're going to go to the lymph nodules, and it's the place where you can find those mature B and T cells.